formula, but you got to be very careful with equity, even for the suburban schools. And there's a political ramification to that. You know, if you all of a sudden they see their budgets going down, you know, you can imagine the hue and cry. In order to transition to that, you're going to have to do it through a cost of living allowance or raise. So, you know, in other words, we get a cost of living increase every year. So if you're going to transition to that, you got to protect them where they are. Otherwise, you're going to have a problem. You can't give them a pay cut, in other words. You can't cut their funding. So you're going to have to maintain them at some certain level and perhaps let them come up at a certain level as well, while you bring up the other inner city schools maybe at a little bit higher pace. But you really have to be very careful in that way to student formula. That's why it's a little bit controversial, since you have to be a little careful in how you do that. You cannot create conflict inside of the districts, otherwise you're going to have some problems. You really have to balance that out in a way that, yes, these kids still need more resources. And oh, by the way, if you're going to give them more resources, you better get some results out of that. Because the counter argument over here in suburbia is, yeah, you're giving these kids all this money, we still aren't seeing the results. Luckily in LA this past year, we saw some dramatic results. And so in essence, we're very comfortable with even looking at a weighted student formula, and I have a blue ribbon panel that's looking at it.
So what's available, the state provides funding both at kind of what's called your general apportionment, and then they also provide categorical funds. Your general portion is more flexible, your categorical funds are more focused on individual programs. The federal government also provides funding. They have what's called the entitlements. They have Title I